We're learning Tanya, Perek Nun Gimel, the last chapter of Likutei Amarim. We're on page 148, towards the bottom. We are, I'll tell you where we are soon. Let me just give you a recap, because some of you weren't here yesterday. But in this Perek, the Alter Rebbe explains, in continuation of his explanations in chapters 51 and 52, and 53, he talks about Shechina again. We learned earlier that when the Torah says, V'shochanti b'soichom, and I will rest amongst them, V'shochanti is a particular level of God, expression of God. It's not just Hashem. Otherwise it would say, V'ani b'tochom. It says V'shochanti. So the Alter Rebbe explains Shechina is the level of Malchus. In the Spheros, in the order of the Spheros, the 10th Sphira, Malchus is the concept of indwelling, resting indwelling. And what does that mean in simple English? The transition between the higher energies of God, which are aloof, more removed from our reality, transitioning that to reality. Right? And by the way, you have this and you need this in every aspect of communication. And I want you to hear this, because this is one of the early ideas that I heard when I began learning Chassidus seriously, and it left an important impact on me in understanding more Chassidus. There is the way a person is to themselves. That's the first. Then there is the way a person is completely to others. That's the third stage. And then there's the way the person is in between. What does it mean, the way a person is in between? In order to move from being within yourself to being completely for the other on the outside, you need a transitional stage. You can't go from being within yourself only to being only to the other and on the outside. Because if you do that, you try doing that, you get a mess. The transitional stage is where you're able to properly bring yourself in a measured way, in a suitable way, to the other person, to the other situation. And Chassidus speaks about this concept in various ways. And I see it over here as well, with Shechina. We have Hashem, as Hashem is pre-tzimtzum, right? Or Ein Sof, the infinity of God. No limitations, only energy, only godliness. That world is a great world, but from that world you can't create a physical table, chairs, relationships. It just don't. That world is infinite. It's intense. Then we have the third stage, which there's a chair and there's a table and there's relation, there's gossip and there's arguments. It's all about the situation on the ground, right? In that arena on its own, without any sense of spirituality and godliness and ruchnius, it's a big mess. And we all know the mess, because we live it every day. So how do you bridge the two? How do you connect the two? The answer is through the stage in the middle, the intermediary stage, where there is kind of a contraction on God's infinity, and at the same time, it takes into consideration the other, the outside, i.e. the creation of the world. Where in God, where in Hashem does this concept exist? It's called Malchus. Malchus is the 10th of the 10 spheros, 10 animating forces, that brings what's higher to what's lower. And Malchus is able to do that. Why it's able to do that, that's another discussion. But basically, because its source is essence, so it's higher than both number 1 and number 3. But I don't want to discuss that now. That's for another time. So, being that Malchus is the place which bridges the two together, we call Malchus Shechina. Where was the Shechina? In the Beis Hamikdash, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, in the Holy of Holies. So the Alter Rebbe has an elaborate discussion about this concept. And there he says, there is the Shechina the way it's in Bria, and the Shechina the way in Kodesh HaKadoshim of Bria, and Yetzirah and Asiya, and in chapter 53, he says, but it all pales in comparison to the way the Shechina is in Olam Hazeh, in the physical world. Where in Olam Hazeh? In the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Where? In the Luchos. Within what? Within the Aron. So this begs interpretation. You're telling me the Shechina is able to link the higher to the lower, level 1 to level 3. How is that possible? If the Gashmias, if the physical world is limiting, restricting, concealing, challenging, how can we say that somehow it has the real Shechina? Says the Alter Rebbe in this chapter, that's because it rested, where was the Shechina? In the Kodesh Kadoshim of the physical world. B'Hashgacha Pratis Lahavdil, their Ramadan started, that's what we're talking about. The Shechina's B'Mokem HaMikdash, the exact opposite of the Klippa of Ramadan. And it's in this place, the Holy of Holies, Koche Koche, that we were not allowed to go into. Only the Kohen Gadol once a year, Yom Kippur. And what did he come in contact with? With an Aron, with an ark, and within the ark, the Luchos, and that's where the Shechina is. By the way, when we talk on Yom Kippur about the Avodah of Ketores, the incense, right? And we say that from the incense it made the smoke, and the smoke became the clouds for the sukkah and all that. That's not Shechina. It's another concept. Shechina is in the Luchos, in the Aron. Says the Alter Rebbe, and therefore, it's not that. Now listen to this. The question was, how can the Gashmias of the physical world, how can it be the receptacle for God when it's limited? And the answer is, we're talking about the Shechina being in the Luchos, in the Aron, in the Torah. In other words, the Torah. So it's Torah. It's Taka. It's a physical Luchos, but those Luchos are Torah. So in other words, what we understand is, Moshe, that the reason why the Shechina in the Kodesh HaKadoshim is where it's at, greater than all the other previous revelations, is because of Torah. Torah we call Chokhmah. So this is a very interesting scenario. We're talking about Malchus, which is Shechina, right? It dwells, it animates, but where does it get its energy? From Torah, from Chokhmah, from the Luchos. Says the Alter Rebbe, yesterday's year we learned that's a very nice idea, but what about the second Beis HaMikdash, which was missing 5 items, including the Luchos, including the Aron? So seemingly, the Alter Rebbe asks a rhetorical question on himself. My entire argument doesn't apply in the second Beis HaMikdash. And to this, the Alter Rebbe said, no, it does. Why? Because although the physical Luchos were missing from the Aron, The physical, what we have is, we have Ein Lo LaKadosh. We still have a remnant of the Luchos energy in the Beis HaMikdash, even the second Beis HaMikdash. And then he went on to say, once the temple, the Kodesh HaKadoshim was destroyed, because the temple, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, the Chazal say, Hashem res, ein lo LaKadosh Baruch Hu be'ilomoi, ela dal adam shel halacha. All that Hashem has in the world are the 4 cubits of halacha. So what do we understand from this? Halacha is the embodiment of the Luchos and of Shechina. And for that, you don't need a Beis HaMikdash. At least till Mashiach comes, when we'll have a Beis HaMikdash. So for that, one cannot argue, wait a minute, I have no relationship with the Shechina today because I have no Beis HaMikdash. So Chazal say, sorry chap, yes you do. Why? Why do you do? Because halacha exists today as it existed even at the time when the Beis HaMikdash was present. So this is part of what we discussed yesterday. Then the Alter Rebbe added one more point. And the Alter Rebbe said that we see that the Shechina, as it expresses itself through halacha, encapsulates thought, speech, and action. Not only action of sitting and learning halacha and Torah, but also your speech is considered action. Because the Gemara says, akimas svasav, the movement of the lips, hava maisa, is considered action. And the Gemara also speaks about the thought. When one uses thought, it's also associated with action. But as we learned in the past, that's not a substitute for actually articulating with your mouth, be it in Hebrew, English, French, Spanish, the actual words of the Torah, because that's where the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, studying Torah, is actualized. When you actually say the words out with your mouth. And that's considered a maisa, action. And the Alter Rebbe says, this is why the Shevim Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, Shevim Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, together with the 613 mitzvahs B'nai Torah, the biblical obligations, the 613 plus the 7 rabbinic equals Keser, the crown. Tuf Chaf Reish equals 620. 613 and 7 is 620. What's the idea? The idea is that the 613 mitzvahs, together with these 7 mitzvahs, the Rabbanon, form the crown. What's the crown? Ratzon, the will. Higher than Chokhmah. Because Chokhmah is already, its abode is in the mind. Chokhmah is already limited to knowledge. Ratzon, will. Just as this will and this pleasure, those powers and faculties of the soul are equal throughout the body. My hand wants, my feet wants, my head wants, my elbows want, my nose wants. So want, ratzon, is equal. So what's the point? The point is that Torah Shebal Peh, which we call in Pasach Alayo, which you say every Friday before Shabbos, Malchus Peh, right? Malchus Peh, Torah Shebal Peh, oral Torah, says the Zohar. In Pasach Alayo, what does it say? That's associated with Malchus. That's what we learned yesterday. Now, please open to 148, and we are V'Hashem. We are 4 lines from the bottom. The last word on the line, V'Hashem. V'Hashem b'chochma yosad oretz. There's a verse that says, and God, with wisdom, establishes the earth. What's the connection between chochma and oretz? This is an answer to the question, right? What's the connection between Shechina, which is oretz, to chochma? What's the connection? So first he says there's a verse. V'Hashem, God, with wisdom, he founded earth. Okay. You know that the power of vegetation, of growth, is in the oretz, not in here. Right? So eretz represents growth. Growth means, and what's the process of growth? The kernel and the seed must rot, must disintegrate, and once it disintegrates into the earth, what we call the koyach hatzameach, the power of vegetation that God created and creates when he created the world in every moment of creation, connects to the disintegrated kernel and makes it grow. That's what happens in the fields of California and in the fields of Eretz HaKodesh. The growers, the farmers, are in touch with Koyach HaTzomeach daily. And it's miraculous. But it first takes the disintegration of the kernel and the seed in order for the faculty of Tzomeach, God's faculty, to identify it, to connect with it, and make it grow. So too is Malchus. Malchus is also about growth. Growth for the next generation. Growth for the next situation. So Malchus of Atzilus makes it possible for Chochmah of Bria to come about, or in more simple words, for there to be Yesh Mi'ayin. For there to be the ex nihilo process, which means the beginning of creation, right? Bria Yesh Mi'ayin, it requires first Malchus, like I've been telling you all along. What is the idea? That only through humility and subservience can there be growth. And if we had to take away something from this year, in addition to everything else, Moshe, this could be one of the lessons. You want to grow, and we want to grow. If we don't want to grow, then, we're in trouble. But a rational, normal person wants to grow. I don't care how old you are. Every person, as long as they're alive on earth, should want to grow. So, I asked someone, I was speaking, I told you, at the Shabbaton this weekend for the teachers of the United Lubavitcher Yeshiva, and they wanted to know the history of the yeshiva, so I shared with them the history and realized that the Rebbe's brother, the Rashag, in 1982, he suffered, I believe, a stroke, 81 or 82, a debilitating stroke, although he walked around, but his speech was slurred. I remember sitting next to him Shabbos morning at Chassidus, and I would hear him learn Chassidus, and he would listen, and when he spoke, you could barely understand him. So, nevertheless, he was born in 1898. So, in 1982, he was 84 years old or so. An 84-year-old man decides he's going to build a new building for the Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Crown Heights on Crown Street. That's not the yeshiva that I learned in. I learned on Ocean Parkway in Flatbush. That was the yeshiva that was opened in 1969. But for whatever reason, he decides to go ahead with this project. So I asked Bogomilsky, who was his right-hand man on these things, like, why did he do that? He says he was a very ambitious person. The stroke didn't stop him. His age didn't stop him, on and on. So when you talk about growth, it's based on a humility of subservience to Hashem. Right? So the Alter Rebbe says the same thing here. V'Hashem yosad b'chochma yosad oretz. Hashem, with chochma, he founded the earth. Literally, people learn this pasuk and they say, God was very clever to make an earth. How Hashem made the earth and everything on the earth. Boy, he must be a real smart God. Because I couldn't do it.
Bingo.
Right? That's not the pshat here in Tanya. That's a nice aphorism to use at a farbrengen with a few cups of l'chaim or wine, and you can farbrengen about that, because there's a lot to talk about. But the pshat in Tanya here is, Hashem, the infinite God, used chokhmah, used the element, the mode of wisdom to create Oretz. And here's the question. How? Oretz is Malchus. Chokhmah is wisdom, right? Seemingly, Yoni, wisdom and intelligence contradicts subservience, Malchus, Bittul. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. If you have the true subservience, then your Chokhmah is a genuine Chokhmah. I've told you over and over, stay away from anyone that might be very smart and a genius and all of that, but they're full of themselves. Go the other way, run a mile away. But they're so smart. They're so articulate. On and on. Yeah, right. And then we find out that they are also messed up, as you guys had that experience a year or so ago with the book writer and all of that, just as one example. Smarts is nothing. Gurnisht, as we say in Yiddish. Gornit, Efes. But when smarts, when Chokhmah is miyusad, is founded on malchus, on subservience, on humility, it's everything. You understand? And that's what Chabad is, by the way. You know the famous joke. The Breslovers speak about Simcha and they're the most depressed. The Geras speak about Emes and the biggest liars. And Chabad speaks about Bittul and the biggest Baligaiva. Right? It's a famous word, and there's some truth to it. But the truth is, putting that aside, that real chokhmah, real wisdom, is humility. And you look at the Rebbe, and you have a paradigm of such individual in our lifetime who lived that way. The Rebbe was a goyin, a genius in Torah, and in knowledge, and in sciences, and in literature. Look at all the videos today, people from all over. Scientists, doctors, rabbis, common folk, anyone, everyone, Jews, non-Jews, they communicated with him in writing or in person, and he's able to dialogue and talk to them. And there were people who said that they were in Yechidus, and the Rebbe didn't know a certain field, he would like nudge them to tell him. He wanted to learn and be educated. I don't know this field, and I want to know about it. Right? That's subservience. That's bittul. So then the chokhmah becomes a genuine chokhmah. The chokhmah is not an arrogant chokhmah of a pompous, oh, I know so much, and you're going to tell me. And did you go to Harvard and Columbia and Punovich and Lakewood? Come on. Who are you to even tell me? That attitude. That's not bittul. That's gaiva. So let's continue now. Says the Alter Rebbe, Hi Torah Shebal Peh. This concept is the oral Torah, the nafke mechochmi law that comes from supernal wisdom, Kamesh Kosav B'Zoyar, the Abba Yosad Brata. A father is the foundation of his daughter. Very interesting piece of Zoyar. Ari Pfeiffer, we welcome you, and we explain. Abba, the father, Yosad, founds, creates, Brata, the daughter. Why not Ben? So It's explained in Chassidus that the bas is the element of mekabel, to receive, the receiver. Abba goes on chokhmah. Chokhmah needs a daughter. And I heard from Rabbi Yoel a beautiful thing in the name, I think, of the Rebbe's father. And that is why the mitzvah of Pruah Revu, according to one opinion and the accepted opinion, is to have one son and one daughter, at least. What's the explanation? You have the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Every one of us should be creating the Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud is Chochmah, the first K is Bina, the Vav are the 6 midos, the Shish midos, Vav, 6, and the last Hey is Malchus. Abba and Ima, Chochmah and Bina are only the first 2 letters. It's not adequate. So then you create a Vav. A Vav of the 6 midos, and Kabbalah it says that's the Ben, the son. That's also not adequate. You must have the last Hey, the Brata, the daughter. And when you have that, then you have the full Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's why you have to have a boy and a girl. How do you like that? Right? In other words, we want to create the image of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, in ourselves, i.e., father and mother. To create it, you need to make a boy and a girl. At least one boy and one girl. Now, understandably, everyone, if one has only boys or only girls, from God, that, send an email to God. You know what I'm saying? And if God forbid someone doesn't have children, that's the way it is. That's the way it is. It's not a chesaron. It's not a negativity and deficiency in them. But this concept, halachic concept, of having a boy and a girl at least to fulfill the mitzvah of Pruah Revu, of multiplying. Why? Because without the boy and the girl, you only have the Yud Kei, you're missing the Vav Kei. I just heard, I love the explanation. Anyway, going back to the text here. So the Alter Rebbe says, as the Zohar says, Abba Yisod Brata, meaning to say, Abba, Moshe, which is Chochmah, creates and founds Brata, the daughter, which is Malchus. The animation of Malchus is through Chochmah. And Chochmah, so that's why we say, Torah Shabal Peh, right, going back to Posach Eliyahu, we say Friday night, the oral Torah. I want you to pay attention this coming Friday night. When you say Peh Posach Eliyahu, you'll see Torah Shabal Peh is Malchus. That's exactly what the Alter Rebbe says here. Tomorrow, Mr. Shem, we will continue, because the Alter Rebbe now has finished kind of chapter 53, and from here, from the last line in 53, he goes back to chapter 35, and then he will end the whole Tanya with a certain concept or two here, and we'll talk about it in Mirz Hashem in the next 2 shiurim. Tell everyone to try to come Thursday. We're going to make a siyum on Tanya together.
What do you mean Thursday? Tomorrow's Wednesday.
I know. Tomorrow we're learning here, and between tomorrow and Thursday we will finish the Tanya. Menashe, please mute yourself. Oy. What else did someone want to say?
Can I share this experience I had? I met
Please.
at a Chabad. I met somebody who was going through a challenging time in life, who was from at one time, was observant at one time, and he went through yeshiva system. I learned in Brisk, learned in Lakewood, and he was so turned off by the competition of who was smarter and who could slug up the next person, that he said that the Talmidim were knocking like Rav Aaron Cutler in Lakewood, like he couldn't come up with this and he said it was such a turnoff that he left it all. And I was schmoozing with him at a Chabad on a Friday night in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was, it was very sad that he was exposed to that kind of chachma without humility.
Right. But I do want to say, for the defense of the Litvischer world in that behavior, it comes out, Isser, you need to know, it comes out of Europe, Mir and other, Panovich, where they had a belief, and you could see it online. There's a great clip of the Mir Rosh Hashiva Rabbi Shmuel Berenbaum here in Brooklyn. He's already passed on, with another Rosh Hashiva. They come to a wedding, they sit down at a table, and they start discussing Talmud. And they mamish are like cursing each other out. I felt like I'm waiting for the guy to slug him. and they love each other. But they had, and I asked some Mira Talmidim from the past, what is it? And he said that was the style. The style was to destroy each other in learning, in public, including humiliation. Now, this is not a upslugging. Yeah, this is not a Hasidic approach at all, but this was, in certain Litvish yeshivas, an approach. This student obviously did not relate to it well, and it left a very bad taste. But in all fairness, there are plenty of students which have gone through that system, and they don't take it in that negative way. But it definitely feels, and when you hear it, and you should hear it, so you just don't listen to me, you hear it yourself from these two rabbis, like, you would never think they're looking to demolish each other and humiliate each other, like saying, oh, your svara, your argument is stupid. What kind of person are you to be able to say that? Where are your brains? That type of, but listen, it's definitely not the Western way of teaching. It's not the Hasidic way of teaching, etc. And I want to say one other thing. Not all Litvish Rosh Hashivas and Gedolim were that way. I'll give you an example. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and his ilk of people, they were so refined. They would never speak this way. So it's a certain culture within the Litvish world as well. And what I'm saying to you is that they had a shita. That was a shita of them, that you'll come out a stronger person, not only more knowledgable and more respectful of Torah, if you knock yourself out and you knock each other out. Stop. Just stay. But I hear the pain from that person, and that's why people should learn Chassidus. There's a famous story that Yoel Kahn would always tell over. He told over to me many times, but briefly. In the 60s, he went to give a shiur in Lakewood, and there was a student there who was like the best student there. And Rabbi Yoel befriended him, and he befriended because they had such deep, great heads, and they were able to talk about certain things, and understand each other. So Rabbi Yoel, but he never came to the shiur. He never came to Rabbi Yoel's Tanya shiur. One day he says he wants to have a yechidus with the Rebbe. Rabbi Yoel was shocked. This is the Litvak of the Litvaks of Lakewood. Anyway, he didn't tell him why, but Rabbi Yoel arranged for him to have yechidus, and he was in yechidus for a very long time. And when he walked out, Rabbi Yoel wanted to, he asked him, so what did the Rebbe say? Did you share something? He didn't say anything. He just slammed. He went out 770, that big door that Ari just came back from, and he slammed it, and you didn't see him for 10 years. 10 years later, he was walking on Kingston Avenue, and he saw Rabbi Yoel, and he says, Rabbi Yoel, and he looks, he realizes the guy that was in Lakewood 10 years ago. And he tells him, there's a lot of details, we're just making it quick. He said basically that he went into the Rebbe and he presented a spiritual problem that he had in his life. Didn't say what it was. And the Rebbe explained to him that the only way this problem will go away is if he learns Chassidus. Because Chassidus makes a person humble. And he's learning and learning a lot, but with a lot of ego and gaiva. And the Rebbe proved the point and pinned him against the corner, in argument. And he couldn't get out of it, but yet he didn't want to learn Hasidus. So he was so upset. And then the Rebbe told him what's going to happen to him if he doesn't learn Hasidus, start Hasidus now. After hearing from him his dilemma, the Rebbe said, you're going to go to these places and meet these people, and your yarmulke is going to come off, and your tzitzis, on. And he says everything the Rebbe said happened. Everything, to the detail. So after 10 years of struggling and realizing first, with anger, slamming the door of 770, I don't want to have anything to do with you guys, he came back and he said, I'm now ready to start learning Hasidus. Rabbi Yoel told him to go to Kaishel Bracha, where the Rebbe gave out wine after Yom Tov. And if the Rebbe stops and says, Shalom Aleichem, so-and-so, Yankel, he should stop and talk to the Rebbe. He went by, and the Rebbe remembered him 10 years later, and he said, Shalom Aleichem, Yankel, but he was so flabbergasted that he couldn't, and he just went further. And then he came to another Farbrengen, and as Purim, actually I think 1975 or so, he came in, and when they came into 770, he heard on the loudspeaker the Rebbe saying, the Torah you once learned, Hamor Shabach, the illuminary, Mutav Lachzirach, will bring you back to do tshuva. Which means everything you learned in Lakewood and all the Torah, it will bring you back. And he flipped out. It's like the Rebbe's talking right to him, because he left. And he became a Baal Teshuvah, and I think I know who it is, and he has grandchildren, he comes from a prominent family, but what was the Nakuda there, Isser, to support your story? The same Nakuda, learning Torah without humility, with gaiva. That's it. Chevra, we'll see everyone tomorrow. Have a great day. Shalom. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.